So, hello and welcome to the speaker series presented by the Entrepreneurs Forum. Today's event is the featured forum with Dr. Kamin Samuel, in which she will be featured on the cover of the March issue of the Bellwether magazine. The Bellwether magazine is an online, bi monthly publication focused on lifestyle and finance for entrepreneurs. Dr. Samuel is a real life superhero. She was the very first African American woman to fly helicopters for the U.S. Navy. After her adventures in the sky, she moved into corporate America and used her IT expertise to help companies sell their products online and manage their websites. Dr. Samuel's PhD in positive neuropsychology, among many other master's degrees, allows her to inspire others to be the best versions of themselves. Today, Dr. Samuel will share with us ways to stop your personal doubts from holding you back from accomplishing your goals. She has lived through tough times both financially and personally, but she figured out a way to become successful and happy. She shares her expertise in making smart business moves that make you feel good inside. So, welcome, Dr. Samuel.
Thank you so much, Erica, and thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and excited to see everyone. Thank you.
I was glad to have you. So now, how did you come to be the U.S. Navy's first African American female helicopter pilot?
Well, it's a bit of a storied journey because it wasn't something that I always wanted to do when I was as a pilot, as a kid growing up. I didn't dream of being a pilot. It wasn't something that I always wanted to do. I wanted to be in business was kind of my thing that I had in mind. And my mother had actually asked me first semester, senior year of college, what do you want? What are you going to do with your life now that you're going to graduate next semester? And I mentioned the Navy and through a kind of difficult path there. When I learned that I could study for the ASVAB and take the test, I took it and did well the second time. Not so well the first time because I didn't know you could study. And they offered me aviation in that session, and I asked them like, okay, well, what does that entail? And they said, well, you have to run 1.5 miles a day and swim a mile. And I was not an athlete at all under any circumstances was I counted as an athlete. So I gave it like two weeks of trying to run and swim. And then I was like, okay, no, put me back in surface warfare, which is what I was closest to business that I could get to. And it was a couple of months later, I was on my second semester senior year trip. And I was walking along the beach at the time. Just kind of minding myself, kind of talking, thinking about the future. And a formation of military helicopters flew overhead. And I looked up and I was like, really, God? And so I called my recruiter and I said, what are the chances of switching to aviation? They said, we'll call you back in 20 minutes. They called back in 20 minutes and said, okay, you've been switched to aviation. Your flight physical is this day. You report to Pensacola, Florida this day. And I was like, no, I haven't discussed this with my family yet. Like I haven't told my parents that I was even interested. And they said, nope, too bad, you're going there. And so from that point on, I went in through flight school, had a tough time getting my commission. And then after that, I made a decision to myself that I was never going to be at the bottom again because it was pretty tough, as I said, getting my commission, and ended up graduating #1 in flight school. And so that was very difficult and and so that's a real it was a real opportunity for me to move into something that I never thought would be possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know from being in the Navy myself, I didn't like the running part either. I did not like any of that part. I didn't mind like the sit-ups and the push-ups and the physical part, but I did not like the long distance running. Didn't like it. That's my least favorite thing to do. I don't get that runner's high, so no, I didn't like it.
Well, I was like, why do I have to run to everything? Like, why do I have to run to the gym? Like, that didn't
Yep.
make any sense to me being a non-athlete. So
Hmm.
that was definitely one of the most challenging
Hmm.
aspects.
Yeah, and it does. It that I think once I got over that, then I was a lot better as far as just getting used to running everywhere you go. You
Yeah.
know, I was never, and I guess now in my life, I just run everywhere. I don't run for fun. I don't run for anything else. I run for survival now.
I love it.
But so, what are some of your favorite memories?
Hmm. I think, one of my favorite memories obviously is winging day. When I did get winged as a pilot, it was a great day, and my family was there. My parents and cousins and uncle and stuff were there, and so it was just fun. And the first African American female pilot overall, Brenda Robinson, was there as well. Um, in addition to that, I would say one of my last days at sea was probably a hallmark event for me because I planned the operation, and it was a 7-ship operation. We were meeting the new ship out at sea that was coming out to relieve us, and I got to plan that, and we delivered the kind of the groceries to the other ships, and it was just a miraculous day of operations and flying. And I actually even have a video of it on my website at kaminsamuel.com. On the about page, we were lucky enough way back in the day, somebody had a VCR camera, and we were able to get a capture of that. And so there were so many days that were just, I was so blessed to be in the service. I really was. I had amazing 9 years, tough. There was some very challenging times too. But I'm very grateful for serving my country.
Hmm. And, being in the Navy myself, I was on an aircraft carrier. So just seeing the flight deck operations, that is something that I remember the most about my Navy career is just being on an aircraft carrier, seeing that day in, day out. And since I was a radar technician, I dealt with the planes coming in and all that all the time, and I got to see it from the combat office, and it was so memorable. I will just and I took it a little bit for granted being so young and
Yes.
being so used to it. I didn't realize everybody's like, "Oh, you did this, you did that." I was like, "Yeah, it was every day." You
Yeah.
know?
It
And
was
you
what
do
it was
take
what
it.
we woke up to every day. It was like, okay, I gotta fly today, I gotta do this. And I also got to be a flight instructor in San Diego, and that was a very great job as well.
San Diego's beautiful. I did my first 4.5 years in San Diego and then transferred up to Bremerton. So it was neat, both areas. San Diego was by far the best.
Yeah.
It is beautiful. So now what are some of your worst memories?
Uh, Probably along with getting, graduating number one of my worst memories was we were told when whoever graduated number one got the command of their choice. And so I was number one by a mile. It wasn't even close. And when the orders came out, they called me in my barracks room and they told me, because I knew I was going to be upset because I had asked for San Diego, right? I really wanted to go to San Diego. And they gave me Norfolk and Norfolk, Virginia. And I literally, I cried, I think, for 3 days. And I called everybody I could. I called Washington. I called my recruiters in Pennsylvania. I called everybody. Like, well, how is this possible? And they said, needs of the Navy. Now, and after the fact, I learned some other things about what needs of the Navy means.
Hmm.
but but they were saying that, we had to balance out the coast with women because there were so few women pilots that you had to go out to sea with. So that was a tough time in my life because I had worked so hard and it was devastating. And so I learned to kind of manage my expectations from there of what was possible, where I fit in the military, in the sense of like what was required from them versus what I wanted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that is something that does come up in the Navy. You never know where you're going. You can want it all you want, but that doesn't mean you're going to get it. I wanted to be stationed in San Francisco and they closed the base down, so I couldn't be stationed there. So I got San Diego. So I just had to adapt. Now, transitioning into the business world. So, what makes you so passionate about sharing the inside out approach to wealth and success?
That's a great question. I comes from actually failing after I got out of the military. And even now to this day, I'm still learning about others, that it's kind of that transition from the military to civilian life is a hard one for most people. And at the time, there wasn't even any transition programs or very little. I think I got a pamphlet. And so as I mentioned, I wanted to be in business. I wanted to learn about business. And so when I left the military, that's what I went to do. And um, I failed. I failed epically, bankruptcy and foreclosure. But what I realized was that failure actually started inside of me. It was with something that I had thought. It was the only thing that I remember, my parents talking about money is like never file bankruptcy. And somehow that became a wormhole in my mind that said, file bankruptcy. What is that bankruptcy? File bankruptcy. And it was when I left the second day, the day before I left the military, is when I actually said the words, because I was expecting this big check and they didn't give it to me. And I said, if I don't have this money, I'm going to have to file bankruptcy. And for 14 months, that phrase rehearsed. Now I know what it was doing in my brain, but it rehearsed and landed until 14 months later, I had to file. And then about 5 months later, when the bankruptcy discharged and the foreclosure notices, and then all in a 3-day period, I also got a IRS audit. I thought I couldn't live through that.
Mhm.
And in that moment, I remembered the rehearsal of the bankruptcy. And I knew that if I rehearsed that I couldn't survive this, I would actually not be able to survive. It would take on a momentum in life of its own. And so from that point forward, I really began this quest to understand the brain and understand how thoughts get created, and that thoughts are things that we create. And so this ability for us to change those thoughts from the inside and have that reflected outside was very, very important to me.
So, how did you convert that financial failure experience into a commitment to master the art of wealth creation?
Hmm. It became that if I could figure this out, right? If I could solve this piece, how could I then, how could I master it? And I used to go back in the when there were books, lots of bookstores, I would go and sit in the bookstores and learn. And basically, what I was really trying to do was rewire my brain for wealth, for success. And I happened to find a passage in a book called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. And there's just a little passage in most of my books. I have 5 of them, 2 of them are co-written. But it's this passage that talks about just say the word and get into the feeling of wealth, success, not just say I am wealthy, because our egoic mind will try to combat that and then we'll have an againstness. And so by just saying the word wealth, I made wealth equal success. I began to rehearse that. And from that point forward, as I was rebuilding my life, that word began to give me opportunities into getting into a corporate job, because I loved also computers. So I got a web developer job and then used it to grow my career and get promotions and raises, even when they said there were none to be had. And from there, I also created the wedding of my dreams using the same word. Like, what would that feel like to see everyone out in the audience who loved me back and have a spectacular day? And then
Mhm.
when I knew it was time for me to leave my corporate job, I used that also to create a coaching practice, and now a thriving coaching practice. And so it's this ability for us to realize it's practice. Like I practiced doing that every day so that it became part of my morning routine to really tap into this wellspring of abundance and wealth and joy and love that's all around us.
Mhm. So you mentioned a lot about coaching. You're kind of known as the coach's coach. And you even have a book for coaches.
I
So
do.
how did that focus come about?
This book, Wealth Creation for Coaches, is actually, I love all of my books. This one is the latest one, and it was written with, they call him the godfather of coaching, Steve Chandler. Steve Chandler has been my coach for over a decade. And he and I have collaborated on this because Steve would talk about how to be prosperous as a coach. He has a wonderful book called The Prosperous Coach, but he never told anybody how. What are the steps? And as we were talking, it was a military flight instructor, a Navy flight instructor. My understanding of how to teach somebody and how to get them to practice and move to their next level is something that is so ingrained in me. That I really wanted to break down what Steve talked about in the Prosperous Coach and what he teaches in everything that he does into kind of, I'm a tactical gal. I want to give people the tactical steps to thrive, to move to their next level.
Now, what if you're not a coach? Will that book still be good for you?
Well, I love that because one of the things that I heard initially from people who were reading the book was these entrepreneurs that were like, I wish I had this book sooner, because these are fundamental principles. One is I really go into a deep dive on kind of clearing those beliefs and looking at what are we rehearsing. I rehearsed bankruptcy. Many of my clients, when they come to me, they've been rehearsing, I'm stuck, I'm paralyzed, I can't make money, I can't find clients, no one will hire me. And so whether I have business owners and executives as well as clients. And so this ability for us to take these kind of universal principles of how do we change what we are rehearsing to what we want to create, that is principle to everything that I do. And then when we design our lives, design our careers, and again, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in corporate, as I said, I use these same principles in corporate to grow from entry level web developer to a global vice president of web operations. And this ability for us to use these steps to stair step our way into greater wealth and success, into possibility for our lives, and then really put ourselves into a position of like, now I've got to do some work, but it's
Mhm.
also on the inside first, and then it moves into the external, so that we can actually realize that whatever is in front of us is also a reflection sometimes of what's inside of us, not always directly. So I don't want anybody to say that, it's about them or shame or guilt. That's not what I'm talking about. It's that we are more creative than we ever thought possible.
Mhm. Exactly. Now, how much of your success in your professional coaching career do you think you brought from your military knowledge?
Mhm. Well, I think you, as especially when they get you at such a young age, right? You learn discipline, really, and it doesn't work in all areas of my life. I wish it did, but definitely discipline and leadership. I think even the resilience, right? Because we didn't have a luxury in the military of a bad day. for you as a radar technician, I counted on the radar system.
Mhm.
If you have a bad day and you don't feel like going to work, you don't feel like doing your job, that's not going to be supportive to my flying into towards the aircraft carrier. So the ability to compartmentalize also and be able to separate kind of what I was feeling versus what I was doing, I think is something that I myself and many of the military members I've spoken with have realized that it can be a plus and a minus, that we can
Mhm.
compartmentalize maybe too much sometimes. But it's super helpful to have had that training to provide me with the corporate career that I've had, as well as, the discipline to write, the discipline to create the business that I have.
Now, has that given you any, like you said, it can be a disadvantage too, as far as the discipline from the military? I know I had it whenever I would be like, well, I don't know why you can't get it done. Just do it. Did you find any challenges that way as well?
Erica, let's see. I had a lot of challenge when I went to corporate because I didn't understand that there is a question that you're going to get your job done on time. Um, you mean you left for the day and it's not done? And so I think even to this day, I'm still very mission oriented, mission driven. And so, but in corporate, I ended up going and getting a master's in spiritual psychology. I always say that to manage, I was good at managing my team, but I wasn't really good. All the other teams were kind of enemies.
Mhm.
um, I also had to learn to settle down and really grow empathy, especially around people who did not have any military background, that to help my ability to communicate with them so that they could get their job done in a way that would be supportive for the team. Because I was pretty direct. I was too direct for the world at that time. And so I had to learn, and that my master's and probably all of my degrees have helped me grow that sensitivity and understand people in a completely different way, because we can learn and we can change and have a growth mindset. So I had to give myself that permission and the training to train myself out of some of that.
Mhm. It's hard. It's a hard transition. I will say that it took me a long time, and sometimes I still struggle, not gonna lie. I try to tackle too much and expect everybody else to do the exact same. And it's a very humbling experience too, to realize not everybody has that same mindset,
They
and you have
don't.
to cater to that. So it does it makes it another challenge, which military people are always up for the challenge.
Always
So,
up for the challenge.
yep, always ready. Now, what makes your business unique and valuable to your customers or your clients?
Erica, I think it's because of how I see the world, right? It comes from my experience. It comes from my military. It comes from all the education. Um, I come from a highly educated background, and I have 3 masters and certificates. I'm, clinical hypnotherapist in addition, and all of that. And so the ability for me, what I also see is I have so much hope and belief in people that they can do anything. And so it's this ability for me also to believe in a bit of luck and magic, and that we create that. So I have both the spiritual realm, the practical, the military, kind of all synthesized together to help people get to their next level. I see, and when I'm talking with someone, I actually see their next level. I see their greatness. I see what they can do, whether they believe it or not. That's something we're going to work on.
Mhm.
But if somebody comes to me and they say, you know, I want to be able to create that, I'm an all in glass all full. You know, let's roll up our sleeves and let me first clear the beliefs that would stand in the way, that would make you think that you couldn't do those things. Then we move into kind of what would you love and what would that feel like? And then move into the taking actions and really move into, like I had to do as a pilot, we had to practice our landing. We had to practice things, you know, well beyond what was necessary so that we could do them in muscle memory, so to speak, that we could do them without thinking. And so that ability to move what we do into our lives and that level of practice, same thing with even what I do with coaches and the Wealth Creation for Coaches book. We really designed these steps, and there's a wonderful story around these stones that I was like, they can't be too sharp. They have, somebody has to be able to take that step, land, own it, then move to the next one. And this ability, I talk in here also about the up and over. When you're going for a goal, you have to go up and over into beyond, so that it pulls you into it. And I think I also learned that from the military.
Yes, you get a lot of beneficial, I guess, just techniques and just strategies in the military on how to keep going and how to do it and how to just give that can do. Now, you're very full and successful. You have lots of degrees. You've really tackled everything that you've done, and now you're working on a documentary. So, what made you go to that direction?
Well, one, I love movies. I think it's always been my dream to actually write a film, write the great American Hallmark film, and this ability to work with people. Now, I work with a lot of people one-on-one, and or in small groups, and there's only so much room in my calendar for the ability to work with someone. And so I really want to help people with the things that I know and the things that I've helped my clients with, so that my clients have done extraordinary things. They've written their own books. They are speakers. They've grown their coaching practices. The ones who are now executives didn't start off as executives. And so this ability for me to start to use these tools with everyday people, like I think everybody, I like to say everybody needs a coach, right? In the sense of everybody needs a champion that believes in them, that sees where they could go and then reinforces that. And so the film, which is called Courage to Thrive, follows three different stories. And they're all people of color, women of color, in terms of there is an African American, and we tell her story and her mother and her grandmother's story in that episode. I also have a 22-year Army veteran Hispanic woman who's extraordinary, and the ability to work with her was really one of the impetuses for this film, because she was told, I did a transition program for the Army in 2020. And on that program, it was a virtual program. They were in Italy. She shared with me that she was told that she would never get a job when she left the military. And that was so that they could keep her in. But that story stuck with me, that there are women being told these things that aren't true. And the third story, which we're hoping to film soon, is that of a wonderful Native American leader, a woman who is the daughter of one of a tribal leader, and she is extraordinary. And the ability for us to start to look just through this lens, and it's not to exclude anyone. I think everyone will see themselves in this. However, there's a part of this journey for especially myself as I talk about with women of color is that there are mindsets that are generational, cultural, that may keep us in a box and not allow us to thrive. And the work that I'm already doing with my clients is all about the courage to thrive, whether they're in corporate, they're coaches, whatever. This is just this lens to help people see themselves, whatever it is that is holding them back from thriving. And we made the distinction recently on the film that thriving isn't always about going after promotion and promotion or client or making more money and all of that. It's also about how do we, as you heard me say earlier, how do we design our lives? How do we design our lives where we feel like we can flourish, that we have abundance in all areas of our lives? And so this ability to even watch me coach these extraordinary women and see that, oh, they're awakening to who they are and what they can create and not feel like they have to churn and chase anything, but they can flourish and thrive. That I'm 110% for. And we wanted to, the director is an extraordinary young man named Josh Sikkema. And this ability for us to capture our stories in a way that make them universal and help people. What's the next step? What's the next step of my life? And move like on these beautiful that the artist that did these stones is to realize that we're cutting a path for ourselves.
Now, what do you hope comes from the documentary?
I think the thing I hope the most is that people will walk away with practical steps, no matter who they are, no matter race, gender, creed, whatever, that they can take away practical steps that they can put into their lives right away. Again, I think it comes from my being a flight instructor. I can't help but give homework and want somebody to practice their way into success. Many people, I even had this question from one of the groups I'm leading now. Someone asked me, why am I not taking action in my life? Like, I know what to do, but I'm not moving on my things. If one of my clients come to me, I'll move on their things, but
Mhm.
I won't move on my things. And I'm like, well, welcome to the club.
Well,
Welcome to the human race.
yeah, and you spoke about the lady in the excuse me in the documentary that was 22 years in the or was it Army? I think it
Army.
was Army, and she felt stuck in there because they told her she couldn't do anything outside of the Army. So if somebody's feeling stuck in their current situation or their life or paralyzed, what advice would you give them?
Hmm. So there's a couple of things. One is to recognize how amazing you already are. And that's something that I think is one of the most challenging things that I get to work with people on, is first understand that you are perfect, whole, and complete. You are enough. Right now, I have all of my clients put, in lipstick or whiteboard pen on their mirrors, I am enough. And I highly recommend that everyone do that. It comes from my work as a clinical hypnotherapist and learned it from Marissa Peer. And this ability for us to own our enoughness. Because what happens is many people will be beating themselves up, like this person that I was just mentioning. They're like, I'm not doing enough. I'm failing. I'm a failure, which is exactly how I heard it for myself. When I failed financially, many years ago, decades ago now, I thought I was a failure. So much so, Eric, and I think you might even recognize this, whether you have this or other military friends of yours. I put my military career in a box because I failed. Who am I to talk about being a pilot when I just went through bankruptcy and foreclosure and all of that mayhem and almost really didn't want to live? And so getting people to understand, if you're in the stuck place, what are you telling yourself? And so write down, what are the words that you hear yourself rehearsing? And then ask where they came from. Whose voice is it? Whose voice is it? Now, it could be a parent, and this isn't about blaming parents. This isn't about blaming anyone. It is simply that we want to notice that if it's not our actual voice, that we picked it up from somewhere. We picked it up from childhood. Do a lot of work with clients and just clearing a belief that might have gotten stuck in there at 4, 5, 6 years old, that they're rehearsing and they don't even know that they're rehearsing it. So when they're stuck, if we can isolate the thoughts and start to flip them, one of the practices that comes from the positive neuropsychology is neuroplasticity and the ability that the mind can rewire itself. It can change. And the last I heard was they measured that up until the age of 97. So this ability to rewire our brain into the positive. We are inherently negative. That is for survival. That is part of our DNA. We've got to flip that. We've got to practice flipping it. So the first thing is to isolate those thoughts and figure out where they came from. Remember who we truly are, that we are enough. And the other thing to do is to recognize where those thoughts are. Are they from the past or are they from the future? Because if they're not in this present moment, one of the things that got me through the toughest, darkest times after the financial failure, not me as the financial failure, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, is also that I kept asking myself, am I safe? Am I safe in this moment? Because what I was doing was projecting out to some imagined future at the time. I could have easily gotten a job, a regular job at that point, and saved everything. But I was in the future saying, I will be so embarrassed and shamed if somebody from my military world saw me working at a grocery store or a department store of some kind. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's how I perceived it. So if we can bring ourselves back to the exquisite present moment, we get to create anew from this moment. And the ability for us to recognize and support us. There's a wonderful phrase I've heard that action follows hope. So if we are stuck, how can we give ourselves hope? How can we shower ourselves with kindness and caring? And one of the books that I wrote was the Successful Life Transformation Journal, which was all about how do we look at our successes? How do we celebrate our successes, as small as they can be, on any given day? Like for me, like if I don't eat a cookie or something sweet on a day, that's actually a big success for me. So let's be clear. But sometimes it was also, can I give myself credit for taking a nap? Can I, when I needed it? Did I send the email? Did I follow through on something? How are we noticing our successes? Because that success breeds success. And so the more we can do that, the better. And then, as I said, designing your life, looking at what you'd like to create, and then rehearsing and practicing. I will say that I like to say I have 3 different kind of perspectives of my life. I have a blessing orientation to life, a learning orientation to life. And through my work and working with Steve and his brilliance is I've been experimenting realm of my life, right? Because what I didn't recognize when I failed those decades ago was that was just one way, that that was just one thing. And there's this beautiful law called the law of separation, that we can have a vision of a thing, of what we want to create. The strategy has to change. I tried one thing and almost took myself out because that failed. I tried another thing, get into corporate. Okay, this is okay. I tried another part of corporate. I tried a bunch of things. But all along I knew I wanted to help people and coach and really help them thrive in new and magical ways. And so the ability for us to realize that our strategy has to change. We grow from experimentations gone awry. Like that's how we thrive, and then we learn and we can soar in our lives. And so that those are some things that if somebody just took those things and started to move and started to practice what they wanted in their life, whether it's more clients or a new career. One of the things I talk about with that wealth exercise that I mentioned, just saying the word wealth in the morning, maybe 30 seconds even, or when you're falling asleep, is what would it feel like if you were at your next level? Now, don't go too high. One of the things I always talk about, and it's in the book, is like you can't have a step too high, right? Because that's where the limiting beliefs come in. Like, and they'll beat you up. So we want to take little steps that keep you growing on your path. And that's this ability for us to really like, let me experiment, let me thrive and grow, let me do this and continue to prosper.
Mhm. Now, you've gotten a lot with your career through education. So where does that passion for that education come from?
Well, I will say it comes mostly from my lineage. I was really blessed. My mother is still, I think I would count her still at I won't say her age, she'll get upset with me, but still an educator. And she was a principal, and my grandmother was, and so many of my grandmother and her siblings all went to college or some kind of school. And so this ability to, and one of my cousins is on, and this passion for education was this idea of, if from education we can do anything. And that education doesn't necessarily have to be from college. It's educating oneself in a path to their next step. It's realizing that we have more power within us if we learn and we grow and we have a growth mindset to keep moving forward in our lives. And it really, I'm grateful for my family's lineage in education, because it's allowed me to do things that I would have never been able to do without that education.
Now, you mentioned earlier when you were talking about the documentary of
Mhm.
how you wanted to produce like a Hallmark movie or be a director of that. So you're obsessed with happily ever after movies. Is there any connection between that and your work?
So I am obsessed with Hallmark. If anybody, wants my top, I have about 15 in my top 5 Hallmark movies. Don't love them all. I have this tribble on my desk that Steve gave me to throw at the TV when they're not good shows. Um, but I'm obsessed with happily ever after, because I think we can design it for ourselves and live into it and create it. And so I think that does inform my work, because I won't collude with anybody that they can't do something. Now, we may need to chunk it down. We may need to put it into something so that they can build momentum, but I'm all for people living their dreams, but from a practical, let's put it into action. What are the steps, not just in our head about it, but what can we create? And so I think that, I mean, I'm even down to, I've been to the Hallmark convention. I'm just gonna raise my hand and let everybody know I'm that gal.
They do have a Hallmark cruise now too.
And I'm going.
I should have known.
I'm all in. I'm all
You're
in
all
on
in.
happily ever
You're all
after.
in. So what's next for you?
Oh, what's next? So, hopefully the film will be out spring, early summer. So that is going to dictate a lot of activity around that, because I'm going to write a book that goes with it, that allows people, which we're just starting on that, because I really want people, I'm going to be that flight instructor forever of like, let's put this into action so you can soar. And so there'll be a book with that. There'll be some fun activity, and there'll be some interesting things that I'm going to do with that, hopefully with the film as we get done. And right now as I mentioned, we're hoping to start filming the Native American segment as soon as we can. I'm looking for executive producers right now for the film, who are looking for impact, and create greater impact in the world, because I really am on a mission to help women thrive. All women from everywhere to thrive, because I do believe that when women thrive and partner and support each other, we then can teach the next generation down and change the trajectory of this world. And so that ability to now help that next generation move into their own ownership of what they can do and create, the sky's the limit for us.
Now, how can people here viewing and listening, how can they get more information or info from you?
Well, I have a website, and it is kaminsamuel.com. And we can put it in the chat, or I think you'll have it in there. And there's also a film website, which is just kaminsamuel.com/film. And, follow us on Instagram. There's a Courage to Thrive film.com, I believe it is, that goes directly to our Instagram page. And so we're just getting started releasing content. Any second now, the director is going to release the sizzle. So I can't wait to see. I haven't even seen it. So I'm looking forward to that. And so that'll be some of the fun things that we've got going.
Good, good. Well, and also you're part of our LinkedIn group on the Entrepreneurs Forum. So if anybody needs to reach out to you, they can reach out to you on that group as well.
Yes.
So we'll send out thank you for being part of the episode today. And also they can see this in the Bellwether magazine as well on the March issue. So you'll be front and center on the front of the cover, which we love having you as part of that. So now I'm going to open it up for questions. If anybody has any, just raise your hand and I'm going to work on getting it unmuted for you. Or they can type it in the chat, however they want to do it. So if anybody has any questions, feel free.
Oh, thank you, Amy, for your lovely comment. I really appreciate that.
You might have covered everything. They might not have anything that they need to ask you, which is good. You were very thorough and in depth, and it was a pleasure having you today. I look forward to reading the article in the magazine, and I look forward to seeing your documentary for sure.
Ooh, we do have a question from Elizabeth.
Let me get to this. Let me get to Elizabeth here and unmute her real quick. Okay, I'm gonna ask you to unmute.
Yes, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
I can.
Great.
Hi,
so
Elizabeth.
I've known Dr. Samuel for a while. I'm very proud of her. She is my cousin. And but here's so this is wonderful, everything. But these are difficult times for leaders who embrace inclusion. And that's what I heard you say.
Yeah.
Inspiring women and equipping women. So maybe you could share with this audience in this anti-woke, anti-DEI environment. You came through the military. which I think is an objective, performance-based standard and finished at the top. But there was probably someone who thought you weren't qualified or
Oh,
didn't have that seat. And now. So could you just share a little bit of that energy and passion with us?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. The cool thing I think about this question is Elizabeth is one of, in my family heroes. She's a lawyer, and so she paved the way also for me, and this ability for us to understand like this inclusion. I was definitely not wanted. I was told to my face, like, a tough moment was when they were like, they should just, and this was a drill instructor, so I'll imitate him, they should just kick you out. And I was like, whatever, like I couldn't even look at him, because we weren't allowed to look at them. And the master drill instructor said they won't kick her out because she's black and she's a female. And so I had that inside of me really the whole time. And that also coming from my mother, Dr. Marion Bell, was this idea of excellence. Like I had to be excellent anyway. So in this world of inclusion, there's this ability for us to realize that most exclusion is because we don't know the other person is us versus them. And I think that's also part of this mission of why I want people to look at the courage to thrive through the lens of women of color, to see themselves, no matter what, that we're all dealing with similar issues. They might be different for those people of color, but doesn't mean that anybody doesn't have an issue. How do we create a greater inclusion? I was really lucky and blessed to have some white male leaders who supported me, championed me in every one of my arenas, whether it was my COs in the military, because I was bound and determined to be number one or number two in every squadron. And I was. In corporate, growing my career, I had some amazing people who looked after me, and those alliances and this ability to create conversation and then help others. And I think one of the most challenging things that I found in corporate was when women came after me, right? And I was surprised by that. I'm like, I literally didn't have any words for why would you take me out? And so I think that's why these projects and the work that I do is so important to me, is that I want people to help each other. And if we are thriving in our own realm, then there's no againstness. There's enough abundance in the world for everyone to thrive and growing their corporate careers. We want our leaders to understand that we are here to support and help them. And if we are excellent at what we do, like we're going to make you look good. And sometimes, like, flat out, Elizabeth told them that, like, I'm here to work for you. Like, I'm here to make you look good. Can you support me? I think the other thing that I would also ask is for women is make sure that you're asking for what you want. Most women do not do their research on what they should be paid and ask for it. You will have to rehearse it 1,000 times, 1,001 times in the mirror, practicing it. Let yourself flush up, let stuff happen, but allowing yourself to know, because a lot of women did not do that, and they asked for things that were far below what the men were asking for. So our ability on the inside out is first to know that we are perfect, whole, and complete. We are enough. We are smart. A lot of times I'm working with women that come with these amazing resumes and they're like, hi, I just want, and I'm like, if I took your name off and put Todd Jones on here, what do you think he's going to get paid with this same bio? And they're like, oh, Oh, a lot. I'm like, okay, so we're going to work. That's this inside out approach to wealth. That's what we're really talking about. If we can see each other and see ourselves rather as brilliant, as accomplished, as owning, like I talk to a lot of moms who I think I always say are the bravest people on the planet because I wasn't brave enough to have children. Was like, they don't realize that they are the most extraordinary project managers. And they'll come to me and they're like, I need to get a job. I'm like, well, like you can talk about how you project manage, multitask, and thrived in that environment. So that's an opportunity for us to really allow ourselves to see ourselves in the circle, put ourselves in the circle. When I was growing my vice president career, I made them put me in the room with the budgeting meeting. Most women will not put themselves in a budgeting meeting. I didn't know what I was doing. They had to teach me how to use a ruler because the things were so, I didn't understand that thing but that was the only way that I could be seen and grow my career is if I did that. So I hope I answered your question, Elizabeth. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Sue.
Suze has a question, so I'm gonna have her unmute. See if she unmuted. Where'd she go?
Unmute.
She's still there?
I also know Kamin,
Hi.
and I'm a huge fan. Hi. I invited John Kennedy, who's also here. He is a neuroplastician, and one of the things he does is train the brain.
Yeah.
And I think you just answered my question with the last thing, which was looking in the mirror and being able to repeat things. Hi, John. Because what he focuses on is practice, and and you talked about practicing a lot, and I just wanted to get really detailed about practice. How
Okay.
how do I practice those positive affirming thoughts?
That's a great question. And John, I'd be able to answer that as well. But it's for me, when I'm working with someone, that practice first, I have people meditate with it. That's what that wealth word. What would be thinking? So some of it is upgrading inside of us. How would I be when I was trying to grow my career from a manager to director? I would walk to meetings practicing what I would be thinking in that meeting. I'm listening. I always call it like, when you're on a plane, are you listening to the flight attendant or are you listening to the pilot that the wing's on fire, right? So the ability for us to bring our sense of emotion, adding emotion to it, adding ourselves in it so that we feel it. We're thinking from this position, thinking about who would we be at that next level? How would we show up? What would we be talking about? Then you're listening and you're actually going to get inspired actions that come through that will be of service. And I there's a longer story for that, but there was a time when I heard that I was practicing the next level. I heard I needed to do these reports. I did them and they were right on time. But when we're in this level of practicing and seeing and putting I am enough on a mirror or on cards, I use that a lot in my life. And the ability for us to see that and literally with my coaches, I'm like, practice your numbers, practice what you're doing, practice how you're talking to people out loud, doing the dishes in the car. I don't care who hears you. Let your dog hear you. I do not care. But we have to get it out of us into the realm so it becomes comfortable, because what we're doing, the mind does not like unfamiliar. So our job by practicing is putting it into familiar. We want these new phrases to be in familiar, not airy fairy. I am wealthy when I got all these bills, not airy fairy like I'm vice president when I'm an entry level. It's what's that next level that you can believe for and move into. Does that help, Sue?
So if I can say something, Sue, thank you so much for inviting me. Dr. Samuel, fascinating. I actually just put a note in on your website for the contact. I'd love to talk to you some more. We share kind of the similar backgrounds, although you were active duty. I was actually contracted by the Department of Defense 15 years ago to start working with Marines to develop my program, which targets the core processes of executive function, but using neuroplasticity the same way you do. So I've trained pilots, both helicopter and,
Wonderful.
and Navy pilots, right? Landing on aircraft carriers. So in fact, right now I'm at Southern Utah University. I just finished training the men's and women's basketball teams.
Oh,
So,
wonderful.
so which is again, all this I learned when I was working through with the military. So I don't want to take any more time here, but I put my email in your
Great.
contact.
We
I'd
will
love to
connect.
get together and connect. Yeah, thank you so
I
much
love
for
that.
today.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for
And thanks,
being
Sue.
here. Erica, I know we're going to go over. Can we do 2 more?
Yeah, we've got time. We still got 15 more minutes. So,
Okay.
we've got Jennifer's got a question.
Okay,
She was
perfect.
first one, so we'll get to her. So I'm gonna
Great.
get her to unmute.
Hi, so inspiring. I love your energy and your
Oh,
joy you bring to the space. It's amazing. So my question for you is in your personal and professional journey of transformation, what was the biggest breakthrough moment for you that led to you pausing and finding the space of being neutral in that experience?
pausing and being, can you say a little bit more about what you're looking for?
So was there an experience that you identified as a breakthrough and you were neutral to that experience? There was no good or bad, right or wrong. It was the understanding of surrender. Maybe that
Thank
helped.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. So I am blessed to have also gone to the University of Santa Monica, and so for a master's in spiritual psychology, and we actually had to train ourselves to be what was called equanimous, right? So we had to practice equanimity, and so there have been times when I have, again, I'm going to use actually even the pandemic, this ability to see that when how do I want to say this? This ability to practice our way even into equanimity, that we are neutral, that there is a positive and a negative. It just is. This is just what we're dealing with. There have been so many of those in my life, Jennifer. I think that it's just, and I think also being a pilot, because we couldn't react emotionally in the moment. We had to deal with what was. But I think there's an opportunity. I'm flashing on a bunch of different things. Even my father passed a couple of years ago, and this ability for me to how I handled it in the moment was I was crying. There was a day, I had just gotten to the house and I was crying. I had to call one of my cousins to tell him. And I was crying, and literally there was a voice inside of me that was saying, "Why are you crying?" I'm like, why are you asking me that question? And it was really this idea of, oh, there's just this ability for me to know that even though he had departed, there is another part of life. And so at any given moment, whether it's the pandemic and going back to what I said, I have a blessing orientation to life. So stopping everybody when it looked horrible and saying, okay, how are we gonna thrive through this? And I stopped all clients and I helped them to shift their businesses, whether they were moving online or to grow. And every one of my clients grew. Not that we wanted that challenge and all the carnage from that event, but it's when we practice neutrality, it's happened so much. I can't find just one. It's just all the different times I've had to go back to a neutral place inside of me that says, okay, after the tears, what's next? Okay, we got to do things. One thing I didn't bring in is I also use with my clients the VIA character strengths assessment. It's viacharacter.org, is a free assessment on strengths. I love to work with people on their strengths. So when I was working with my mom on planning my dad's service, I would have to be like, okay, I've got to make this phone call. I can't make this phone call. And I'm like, oh, wait, my bravery, oddly enough, out of 24 strengths, bravery for me is like 20, maybe 19 on 24 of my strengths. But I could pair my lower strengths with my top strengths of gratitude and love of learning. And I did that. Now, Jennifer, I will tell you, I ate a lot of cookies right after that also, but it was this ability to pair my strengths and bundle them in a way to pull myself up back into a level of flow. So those are some of the ways that I've had to kind of ground myself in neutrality when it looked tough. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Caprice.
Okay. Yep, so we've got one for Caprice now, so let me ask her to unmute. Okay, there we go.
Oh, thank you so much. I love your last thought, and I never thought of it from that perspective before. So I'm going to look into that Pair Strengths website. So thank you for that little nugget of insight.
You're welcome.
When you're going down a journey and you have this vision, and there are so many obstacles in front of you, mostly from naysayers, but you have to get through there to get to the other side somehow. And how do you do that? How do you move forward when you're constantly being stopped?
By others?
Well, say bureaucracy, or just the opportunities aren't presenting to move you forward to that vision. How do you navigate that?
It's a great question, because I usually would create, I'd go to create the scenario. So when they would tell me in corporate, we're not promoting anybody, we're not paying anybody anymore, we're not, whatever, I'm like, okay, I'm still going to actually show you why you should promote me. And many times I was promoted and I had to keep it quiet to myself until they were ready. And so I was still acting in that new role, but nobody knew. So if you could give me a little bit of a particular scenario, maybe I can give you something specific directly for you.
Okay. Well, I too was in the Canadian Forces for 27 years in the Army. And throughout that process, initially when I joined, I wanted to be an organizational psychologist and help soldiers who were injured and repurpose them and give them hope and understanding, that the forces could retrain them in very capable ways, and we'd have committed people on the force. But that wasn't the outcome that I achieved. After 27 years, I experienced similar frustrations with these systems. But through that journey, I acquired tools in healthcare, in community economic development, all this education. It was amazing that I acquired these tools throughout my career. And then when I left the military, I looked back and I thought, okay, well, how do I apply these? Like, I've got these great tools, now what? Now what do I do? And I had that limiting belief that, I was in the military. That's all I know. I don't have any other language. I don't understand the civilian world. What do I do? So I actually went to Nepal and meditated and helped out in communities over there. And through that, opportunities started coming up. Not necessarily giving me an opportunity to practice my purpose, but giving me more tools to create and design a vision. Because what I was noticing was there were a lot of systemic dysfunctions in healthcare, in housing, in social services, in the environment. And I was looking at, well, how can we as communities come together and mitigate those gaps in the systems, because they are not supporting the people that they're intended to support.
So Caprice, I just want to, because I have some information for you. So I would love to have a conversation with you about this, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Because I think
thank you.
One of the ideas is simply, how can we get high enough like a different view of what you'd like to create, and have you created, and it might be a small stair step and it might look differently. That's where that vision versus the strategy changing.
Right.
I want you to keep that in mind, because it may change, but you have some extraordinary skills. You are just like especially the other women that I worked with in the military who had done 22, 28 years. And they're like, I don't know what to do with my life now. Like, I have these ideas and I can't retire because I'm too young to just sit around. And so this ability to do almost a skills inventory of all the things that you can do, that all the things you love to do and how you help people naturally. And then you and I can have a conversation about how that might sync up, that, and just might be just one or two different avenues to try to move in there. The other thing I will say is, if you have a dream and other people are negative against that dream, try to keep it to yourself as much as possible. They don't need to know how you're doing. Protect it in a way, because what you're looking for are people who can champion you,
Right.
versus anybody who can take you offline. That's their limiting belief. That's their junk. And so we can just let them go. That goes back to Jennifer's question about kind of equanimity and like, oh, that like shields up. I'll put like a light shield around me to protect me. And I'll, prayer and all of that to protect me from other people's stuff. And so that's an opportunity for us at all times to do that. But definitely connect with me. But
Okay.
think a little bit more like, what would it look like if I had it exactly the way I wanted it? And then we get to play.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. Thank you so much. A great question. Now
Okay,
we're gonna
we'll go ahead and take Dr. Kelvin Bell too.
Dr. Kelvin Bell, who, so I didn't share with how I got into the military. One of the amazing aspects of my story is that I used to sneak into my older brother's room and put on his cover, because he was in ROTC, and his sword, and he did not know that. And so I'm just wanted to say welcome to my brother, who also had a hand in me becoming a Navy pilot. Hi, Kelvin.
Good morning, sis.
You're frozen.
Congratulations. I am appreciative of all your information that you provided.
Thank
I had a
you.
question about
Sure.
how you'd advise working together as an intimate couple in business together with the same operational goals for the organization, and how to work through that best to be supportive and encouraging of one another in that process.
That's a big question. So I'm blessed to have an extraordinary husband who I get to work with sometimes. But one thing I will say is, we don't always work too closely together. All that's going to change this year. We're going to do some work together. I think the thing that I will say at the highest level is the thing that I recently married a couple, and I told them this same thing, is kindness, love, and respect have to be the number one hallmark. The thing that's printed on everything is kindness, love, and respect. That when any issue comes up, how do we come from that place? That we negotiate, we have conversation, we really recognize that the other person is a champion. We want each person to own that, and it's 100% responsibility for each person to own how they work with the other person. And the ability for us to see get back to the vision, the strategy may change, but to have as much kindness, loving, and respect when we're talking with each other, especially if there's a partnership. Like I said, Mark and I don't work that closely together yet. And I was told by Steve, never coach him. So never coach your husband. And so I've abided by that mostly, but I'll ask permission if I'm going to coach him. So I hope that's helpful. But it's really, those are the hallmarks that I always go back to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Well, Erica, thank you. Thank you for an extraordinary time. I really appreciate you. I appreciate your service and hanging off of the
Thank you.
radar and keeping the radars up when the
Yep.
aircraft are coming in, because that's a
Having to
big
bring those
deal.
helicopters coming in and getting you safe. That was the key there. It was great having you on today. We look forward to this article coming out in March. I did put a link to your book as well as your website,
Oh,
so
thank
people
you.
could get a hold of you that way. And I'm going to check that book out as well. I've
Great.
got some Amazon credits, so I'm going to use those. And I look forward to seeing this article in March and having you on our cover.
Thank
And
you.
it was, once again, as usual, a pleasure spending time with you. And we'll have to get together and do lunch soon because you're in
We will.
Pensacola now.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you again, Kamin.
Thank you.